Disturbing moments on board this Alaska Airlines flight as a passenger appears to lose control. A flight attendant jumping in to subdue the man, at times punching him, trying to get the passenger to release the hair of 32-year-old Erica Ramos sitting in front of him.
I told him her hair, sir.
I really wasn't sure what was happening in that moment. I was afraid that this person was going to start punching me.
Erica escaping the seat and the flight attendant calling for backup.
I need another able-bodied male to come help me.
Erica says the attack caused painful swelling and she's still getting headaches 9 days later. There was a moment where we actually see your face in that video turn around and look at him. What were you thinking, and did you say anything to him?
I did not say anything to him. I think I was just really in shock. From my understanding of things, he was having a psychotic episode, and I didn't necessarily want to interact with him and possibly make things worse.
The plane, still on the ground, was scheduled to fly to Portland, Oregon from Oakland, California on February 1st, but after the chaotic ordeal, it was forced to return to its gate so authorities could intervene. It's not every day that you see flight attendants throwing punches to try to subdue an unruly passenger. Was that the right move there?
The flight attendant who had to respond to this took the immediate actions that you would take if you were able to take the crew member self-defense training. We're in a confined space. We cannot call for help. There's no other way to do this. And there was imminent danger here. And so the passenger needed to have action against them in order to stop what they were doing in severely harming another passenger.
Alaska Airlines telling NBC News in part that the man appeared to be experiencing a violent medical episode that involved an ongoing physical assault against other passengers and our crew. Our crew responded to the chaotic situation quickly and kept all guests safe, adding that the man has been banned from future flights. The airline has found itself at the center of increased public scrutiny recently after multiple high-profile safety incidents. It was an Alaska Airlines flight last January that had its door plug blow off the fuselage of a Boeing 737 MAX 9 midair. At the time, the airline saying incidents like this are rare and the passengers and crew landed safely. And in 2023, an off-duty Alaska Airlines pilot attempted to disengage the engines of a plane mid-flight. That pilot later telling investigators he had recently taken magic mushrooms. This latest incident resolving relatively quickly, but leaving passengers in shock as flying continues to drive many to the breaking point.
Dana Griffin joins us from Los Angeles. I think all of us would be at the breaking point if that happened to us. Dana, what else did you hear from that passenger you spoke to about what led up to the incident we saw on video?
Yeah, well, Tom, Erica Ramos says that before the plane even left the gate, that passenger was overly chatty at first, then started hyperventilating and hitting his head on the back of her seat. She says he lost consciousness at one point, but once he regained it, that's when he grabbed her hair. She says she never spoke to him before or after the incident. And according to Alaska Airlines, that flight was ultimately canceled because one flight attendant, not the one in that video, determined that they were unfit to continue. And that is a safety call flight attendants can make if they've experienced mental or physical trauma, because they've got to be fully present in order to do their jobs. And Tom, as you just saw, sometimes it requires them to get physical.
Yeah, we've seen a lot on airplanes. I don't know if we've ever seen anything like that. Okay, Dana Griffin, we thank you.
News in Santa Monica, where homicide detectives are investigating after a woman's body was found badly beaten on the beach this morning. Lifeguards discovered the body inside a sleeping bag just after 7 a.m. along the shoreline. Santa Monica police say the woman was declared dead at the scene. Officials suspect homicide due to evidence of trauma to her face. We still don't have an identity on the woman, but police believe she was about 30 years old and homeless.
The firefighters and volunteers are battling wildfires in the mountains near El Bolson in Argentine Patagonia. The fires, which have been spreading across multiple outbreaks since December, have scorched over 25,000 hectares. Our next report tells you more.
Hasta el momento se tiene contabilizado que hay más de 40 personas fallecidas. Esto ha derivado que el bus venía en su capacidad, venía bastante lleno, según lo van a conocer automovilistas que vieron pasar el bus. Por la hora son buses que trasladan varias personas a sus lugares de trabajo, posiblemente se dirigían hacia el sector de la terminal, pero al caer esas personas quedaron unas sobre otras, quedaron pues con golpes internos y esto les provocó prácticamente la muerte instantáneamente.
Shows bird flu is mutating beyond chickens and cows. A Nevada dairy worker reportedly tested positive for a new variant of the disease. The new strain killed one person and severely infected 2 others. Public health officials say the disease is spreading to other animals. One was a cat that had to be put down after showing symptoms of bird flu.
There can be neurological symptoms with this, as I understand it, so that might look like circling around unusually.
Well, the CDC maintains the risk to the general public is low. The economic consequences are starting to mount. The cost of eggs is still climbing along with chicken and other poultry products as well. Some states like New York are shutting down poultry markets, hoping to stop the spread.
Volunteers in protective clothing were removing decomposing bodies from the Muzenze prison in eastern Congo's Goma on Monday. That grim task, taking place 2 weeks after clashes between Rwanda-backed rebels and the Congolese army, led to a mass escape from the facility. Teams from the International Committee of the Red Cross were clearing and disinfecting damaged buildings to prevent health risks. Goma resident Pacifique Mugulwa, who lives near the prison, said children had been wandering around the area, leaving them exposed to disease.
Regardless of whether they are prisoners, it is truly heartbreaking. They have been there for more than 2 weeks. The smells are everywhere, everywhere. Truly, it is very heartbreaking.
A rebel alliance spearheaded by the M23 group seized Goma on January 27th. It is the worst escalation in fighting in eastern Congo in more than a decade and has left thousands dead. Despite announcing a unilateral ceasefire, the rebels have continued to march south towards the city of Bukavu. At the weekend, leaders from Eastern and Southern African blocs held an unprecedented joint summit with the aim of defusing the crisis. The summit urged all parties to hold direct talks, though Congo has repeatedly refused to hold such talks with the M23. The first ever summit between the two blocs reflects the continent's deep concern over the violence and the standoff between Congo and neighbouring Rwanda, which denies allegations it is fueling the conflict with its own troops and weapons.
Google Maps is now showing the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America for users in the U.S. Google said that anyone in Mexico on the Maps app will still see it as Gulf of Mexico, and users around the world will see both names. The change follows President Donald Trump's proclamation to rename the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf of America, and Google says that it made the change to adhere to its practices of complying with government names.
Inflation has come way down since June of 2022 when it hit 9.1%. Last year, it averaged just under 3%. But prices remain higher than they were, and that can have a big impact on a small town when that town is dependent on a single major employer. Jonathan Vigliotti has tonight's Eye on America from Connell, Washington.
For half a century, Connell, Washington's economy depended on French fries. Up until September, this plant processed 300 million pounds of potatoes into fries every year. Adam Kunkel moved his family here to the town of about 3,000 in 2013 so he could work at the factory. His wife, Katrina, opened a coffee shop.
We finally bought a house like 2 years ago. Being first-time home buyers, we were so excited, and we thought this is going to be great.
Great until the fall, when the factory laid off all of its workers. The parent company pointed to a national decrease in fast food visits, which drove down French fry sales. They say caused by inflation. This fall, one of their customers, McDonald's, reported sales were down 1.5%, enough to help devastate this local economy.
I think French fries will be around forever. Your livelihoods will be stable.
I'd worked there for over 11 years. I was just like, what am I going to do now to support my family?
If you're a town who's just lost your lifeline, what do you do next?
This is the reality of these events hitting these small town communities, is there's not an immediate solution to help them.
Ryan Herzog is a professor of economics at Gonzaga University.
Donald Trump campaigned on bringing prices down on everyday goods. Do you see that happening?
I don't know how. When you talk labor costs and you talk tariffs, all of these things are going to ultimately put some price pressure in place.
Inflation impacts so much of what we buy, everything from bread and eggs to potatoes. Nearly half of all Americans say they feel worse off today than they did 4 years ago. Inflation drove many people to the polls, and in towns like this, it might be driving them out.
We had people, generations of families that worked here.
Connell Mayor Lee Barrow says the plant's closure has already led to collateral damage, a 10% cut in the town budget due in part to lost tax revenue.
What kind of ripple effect could that have on the rest of the community?
Absolutely could affect retail. It could affect enrollment in our schools.
And it doesn't end there. Spending less has led to a scale down on the dollars made from pizza sales. Kanwardeep Singh is the owner of Papa Ray's.
How busy was it when the factory was in operation?
Something around 3,000, so
3,000?
Yeah, a day.
A day?
Yes, and now it's shrink like sometimes 600,
Wow.
And closer to the Kunkel home, coffee.
We've cut back our hours just to try to save some money to be able to keep all of our people on board. The cost of milk, the cost of coffee beans, everything, it goes up,
The town of Connell now faces a fork in the road, struggling to hold on while searching for new ways to bring prosperity back to its table. For Eye in America, I'm Jonathan Vigliotti in Connell, Washington.
As for the Kunkels, Jonathan tells us Adam has had a number of interviews, but he hasn't found a job. Katrina is still running the coffee shop, but business is down 15% since the potato factory closed.
criticizing activists and judges who he says are trying to stop his efforts to investigate fraud, waste, and abuse. Courts are pushing back on Trump's attempts to end birthright citizenship, freeze federal grants, and overhaul federal agencies like USAID. Now some fear a showdown between the top levels of the executive and judicial branches. Let's bring in ABC News senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer for more on that. Hi, Devin. So federal judges keep telling the Trump administration that essentially they can't just cut off funding Congress has already approved or shut down federal agencies because there are procedures they have to follow. Trump and Musk, though, say these federal judges are being corrupt. What options does the Trump administration have if a judge tells them they can't shut down an agency?
There's been such a flurry of legal activity, Diane. It's important to keep in mind first, before I answer that question, just what posture these cases are coming to these courts in. This is a very rushed emergency preliminary judgment by each of these judges. So one of the things to keep in mind as you're following this is none of these rulings are final, and none of these rulings are final by those judges. These are simply temporary restraining orders, preliminary injunctions, basically a pause of the Trump administration, a setback for Trump for sure, but a temporary one potentially. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, of course, all of those temporary actions can be appealed. And the Trump administration, in each of the cases you alluded to there, from the NIH caps to the OMB funding freeze to the dismantling of USAID, the administration plans to appeal all of those temporary injunctions and restraining orders. So this fight is in the very early stages, and there's going to be a lot happening in the coming weeks, and that's one of the things that's going to be important to watch. Not only will these judgments be carried out further in the district courts, but they'll be judged in the appeals court and very likely in the next few weeks, the Supreme Court, Diane.
And Devin, Chief Justice John Roberts released a statement on New Year's Eve saying that attacks on federal judges and open defiance of their rulings will not be looked upon favorably. He was directing that at the administration and Congress, among others. How significant is that warning now in the context of everything that's happening?
It's fascinating. The Chief Justice of the United States, who was, of course, appointed by George W. Bush, a Republican, a conservative diehard, John Roberts, doesn't speak publicly often, Diane. He does release this statement at the end of the year every year. It's on New Year's Eve. Everybody's out partying. They don't read it. But this year, his statement, without naming names, was very clearly seen as a shot across the bow of the incoming administration and Republican majorities in Congress. John Roberts did sound the alarm about politicians openly defying court judgments, talking about openly defying court judgments, saying that that will not be looked upon favorably. It's dangerous for the republic. And so now as we start to see this swirl of actions from the Trump administration, those words are starting to come back into focus and perhaps are one tea leaf about how this court could approach some of these legal challenges when they make it there.
All right, senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer. Thanks, Devin.
Hoy esto se convierte en una realidad de regresar los primeros venezolanos. Regresar bien, aquí serán atendidos, serán recibidos de acuerdo a las instrucciones que usted nos ha dado, presidente. Aquí está, mire, todos los organismos, está la Cruz Roja Internacional, la Cruz Roja de Venezuela presente. Ellos van a estar viendo, están los medios de comunicación, está Protección Civil, los bomberos, está el aeropuerto, el Ministerio de Asuntos Penitenciarios, y ya comienzan a bajar los primeros, señor presidente.
Garantía completa de la reunificación amorosa de la familia venezolana. Para ello,
more than 24 religious groups are suing the Trump administration over a change in policy that allows ICE agents to make arrests in churches. The lawsuit states that the new policy is causing fear of raids leading to lower attendance at worship services and other valuable church programs. The Trump administration hasn't commented on the lawsuit. Meantime, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem requested that the IRS help with immigration enforcement. The Wall Street Journal reports that in a memo sent to the Treasury Department, Noem said ICE needs help pursuing financial audits of businesses suspected of having undocumented workers, focusing on human smuggling and trafficking, and assisting with arrests and removals. Noem cited President Donald Trump's Securing Our Borders executive order.
Palo y mire, ve acá, maldito haitiano del diablo, bájate de ahí.
Por la mañana cuando ellos vinieron a buscar a los haitianos y me llevaron aquí también. Pero ellos me dijeron que yo haciendo mucho ruido y por eso.
But let's begin this hour with NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist. Aaron, good morning. Let's begin with the president's interview with Fox News. We heard a little bit of it over the weekend in the lead up, of course, to the Super Bowl. What else are you learning about the president's stance when it comes to Gaza?
Well, he's been talking a lot about Gaza, Christine and Savannah, and I should note that as that interview with Fox News was airing last night, at roughly the same time, the president was in the Oval Office making remarks, and he was asked about Gaza as well, the ceasefire deal that Hamas has put on hold, a prisoner and hostage swap this Saturday has been put on hold by Hamas because it says Israel is shooting at Palestinians in Gaza. And so the president said, with that being on hold, that he believes that all of the remaining hostages should be released on Saturday by 12 o'clock, he said. And if not, as you noted in that sound you played earlier, all hell would break loose. He also did caveat that by saying it's really up to the Israelis. The Israelis might decide differently. But his belief was that the hostages, all of the remaining hostages, should be released. Now, at the same time, we know that President Trump has talked about the United States, about his administration taking ownership of that enclave and not allowing Palestinians to move back into it. Rather, they would be moved into other countries. You heard him reference Egypt and Jordan in particular. He was asked about that during this interview with Fox News. I want you to hear a little more of what he had to say about it.
So when you hear the pushback from the Middle East, what do you think?
I don't hear that much pushback. A lot of people thought it was a great idea. Really, a lot of people. And I'm not talking about big money for I just think it would be stabilized if the United States owns the Gaza Strip. If people aren't living in the Gaza Strip and Hamas isn't there because nobody's there, people aren't there, nobody's going to be there. And later on, it can be developed. You'll give some to Saudi Arabia.
So you're not saying U.S. troops?
No, you don't need no, Israel will watch it because it's right next to Israel.
Now, critics have called this effectively ethnic cleansing of Gaza, and we've also heard from many Arab countries say that they don't want to see Palestinians displaced and they don't want them moved into their countries, Christine and Savannah.
Yeah, Aaron, one of those countries is Jordan, and we said today that President Trump will be meeting with King Abdullah of Jordan. What's their stance right now? What do we expect to happen there?
Well, so this meeting is supposed to happen a little later this morning. It's interesting, I think, that we got the schedule from the White House for the president today, and it does not include a press conference between these two leaders. We saw the Israeli prime minister and the Japanese prime minister at the White House last week. There were news conferences with both of them. In this case, bilateral meeting, a lunch, a working lunch, and that's it. So the only time we'll see the two men together will be on the arrival and the departure. It's expected that this will come up. The idea of moving Palestinians into Jordan will come up with the Jordanian king, and that there will be pushback. There was a question put to President Trump in the Oval Office last night as to whether he would stop foreign aid to Jordan and to Egypt if they didn't take in Palestinians. And he said, and I'll read this, sure, why not? You mean if they don't agree? If they don't agree, I would conceivably withhold aid. So that's something that apparently is now on the table.
And Aaron, while we have you this morning, I want to ask you about some news out of Washington that's making waves here in New York City. The DOJ ordering federal prosecutors to drop those corruption charges against the New York City mayor, Eric Adams. That's according to a senior Justice Department official. What more can you tell us about this?
Yeah, this same official says that the acting deputy deputy attorney general has ordered that these charges be dropped and that they be dropped without prejudice, meaning that they could be refiled in the future. These corruption charges against the mayor of New York. They've not been dismissed yet. We did hear from Eric Adams' lawyer who said that this is a win, a victory for his team. And you might remember that this indictment came down in September of last year. And this memo from the acting attorney general suggests that it was too close to this year's mayoral primary coming up in June. And also that this indictment limited Adams' ability to work with President Trump to crack down on immigrants in New York City. And so we expect that the administration, once this happens, if it happens, a judge does have to review this order, that the case would be reviewed by the incoming Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in New York in the Southern District after the general election for mayor in November. And I think, Christine and Savannah, that is something that has some people wondering if this is politically motivated, that if these charges are dropped against the mayor, then there would be the Trump administration would be able to sort of hang that over Eric Adams' head and have him be more open to doing what the Trump administration wants him to do.
All right, Erin, thank you so much.
The European Union chief vowed President Trump's latest tariffs will not go unanswered, and it'll trigger countermeasures to protect its workers. Trump placed a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports. He signed 2 proclamations that go into effect on March 4th. Last year, roughly 29 million net tons of steel were imported to the U.S. Critics said this could mean you'll pay more for everything from canned soda to cars.
Tariffs could impact Montana's economy, especially the agriculture industry. But exactly how remains to be seen. So, how will tariffs play out?
A lot of people are asking me that very question.
Like the rest of us, Timothy Knavel isn't really sure. His business, Knavel Ag Supply in Potomac, sells all kinds of farm machinery across the region and the world.
I got my own thoughts on it, but they don't carry much weight because there's too many unknowns yet. Once we know what's really going on in the bigger scheme of things, then I'd have an answer to that.
Derek Sheehan with the Bureau of Business and Economic Research told MTN that, here in Montana, tariffs could have big impacts on the state's ag, energy, and manufacturing.
So that affects Montana households that consume those goods. So anything bought from Canada or China, or Mexico for that matter, will increase.
Prices could raise because of tariffs enacted by the U.S. and other countries, and that could roll over into higher prices for things like gas or groceries. But, Sheehan said, this wouldn't last forever and wouldn't be a full 25% increase in prices.
Markets will adjust and things will sort of wash out. But how long that takes and how much it hurts will be up to how quickly Montana can adjust to this new norm.
In the meantime, Knavel and plenty of others are uncertain.
I don't have a crystal ball, and it'd help me business-wise if I did, but I just don't believe it's as scary and evil as what a lot of people are making it out to be. But, on the other hand, if they're talking 25% tariffs on goods coming to the country, it's not going to be a good thing, I don't think.
While he doesn't think it'll hurt American industry too much, tariffs are definitely on his radar. He's waiting to see what happens.
I think if anything, in the long run, it'll be better. And to tell you the real truth, I don't know we're going to see any of these tariffs actually play out. Again, why I say I'll believe it when I see it.
In Potomac, Caroline Weiss, MTN News.
Steel and aluminium are both key inputs for the US-Australia defence industries in both of our countries. I presented Australia's case for an exemption, and we agreed on wording to say publicly, which is that the US President agreed that an exemption was under consideration in the interests of both of our countries. What I envisage is continuing to respond diplomatically. That's how you get things done. My government's got a record of getting things done in Australia's national interest. I'll continue to do so. I've made very explicit, I said to President Trump that this was an issue of some media coverage in Australia, and that we therefore agreed on the words that would be used, that it was under consideration. That's what I'll stick to, but we'll continue to engage quite clearly constructively. But can I say this? It was a very constructive and warm discussion, again, with President Trump.
This is the first time that I met with President Trump in person. So this was the first time meeting face to face. But for many, many years, I have watched him on television. So it was quite I was so excited to see such a celebrity on television, to see in person. On television, he is frightening, and he has the very strong personality. But when I met with him, actually, he was very sincere and very powerful and with strong will for the United States as for the whole world.
Always take two things when you leave home, your phone and your wallet. That's what we have been hearing for years, but in India, even if you forget your wallet, it's mostly fine because your phone has UPI. India's homegrown digital payment system. Almost every Indian uses UPI nowadays. You take out your phone, you scan the QR code and you transfer the money. India logs around 440 million UPI transactions every day. And guess what? You can use it in France too. France is the first European country to adopt UPI, so we decided to see how it works. Where in Paris can you use UPI? Take a look. Picture this. You've just landed in Paris. You're excited to see the Eiffel Tower. But first, you need tickets. So there are two options. You either search for a money exchange counter, fumbling for some cash, or you use your card, getting hit by foreign transaction fees. Sounds like a lot of trouble. But not anymore. Because now, for the first time ever, you can simply pull out your phone, scan a QR code, and pay using the good old UPI, just like you would back home in India. And I'm about to try it out myself. So let's buy a ticket to go and see the Eiffel Tower. The process is quite simple. I have my Eiffel Tower ticket portal open here, and there is a UPI QR code right on the screen. All I have to do is open my banking app, scan it, and just like that, I have bought a ticket to see this iconic symbol of Paris. No forex, no card fees, and no additional charges. UPI, we know, has become a part of daily life in India, but it does feel a bit surreal to be using it here. France is the first European country to adopt UPI. India's Unified Payments Interface Service. The deal was initially signed in 2022. It was between the NPCI, the National Payments Corporation of India, and Lyra, France's fast and secure online payment system. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi talked about it during his 2023 visit to France.
फ्रांस में भारत के यूपीआई के उपयोग को लेकर भी समझौता हो गया है। अब मैं तो समझौता करके चला जाऊंगा, आगे बढ़ाने का काम आपका है। साथियों, आने वाले दिनों में इसकी शुरुआत आईफेल टावर से की जाएगी।
In February 2024, the service went live, with the Eiffel Tower being the first merchant. The choice makes perfect sense. The Eiffel Tower is the world's most visited monument. It welcomes 6 to 7 million visitors every year. Indians make up the second largest group of international visitors. With UPI, things have become a lot easier for them. And it's not just the Eiffel Tower. UPI is now accepted at Galeries Lafayette, one of the biggest shopping destinations in Paris. Again, picture this. You walk into your favorite store, pick up a bag or a dress, and pay using UPI. No card, no cash, just a simple scan. This is not just about convenience. It's a massive leap for India-France relations. The adoption of UPI shows the confidence France has in India's digital ecosystem. It's also a huge moment for the fintech sector back home. It proves their technology is good enough to be adopted anywhere in the world. And it's not just stopping with France. More and more European countries want to adopt UPI. Years ago, Western tech was seen as the gold standard, but India has come leaps and bounds in the last decade. Digital finance is one area where India can rival and perhaps outperform Western technology. As of today, 7 foreign countries use the UPI system. For Indian travelers, this is all about convenience, but for other countries, especially in the global south, this is a template. UPI can help them bridge the financial divide, just like it did in India.